Well, cancer is like that, jerk boss you have, or maybe it's a neighbor that gets under your skin, that can bully you, that is unpredictable, that is completely aggravating. But at the end of the day, that jerk can make you stronger and can make you think about some things you may not have thought about before. And so ultimately, the way they handle the jerk is to not let it rock your boat too much, but look it in the eye and go toe to toe.
Uncorking a Story presents Cancer is a Stupid Jerk, a podcast where we share real stories from fighters, survivors, caregivers, and healthcare heroes who stand face to face with cancer and say, not today. We're all about embracing the laughs amongst the tears, finding elements of joy and lessons along the way, and proving time and again that love, laughter, and community are important tools on the treatment journey. So, whether you're in the thick of the fight, cheering someone on, or just here to be inspired by incredible tales of courage, resilience, recovery, and the undeniable power of the human spirit, you're in the right place, because together we're showing cancer that it picked the wrong fight. Now here's your host, Mike Carlin. Bill Potts is a motivational speaker, a business leader, and a community builder who has held executive roles at Ironman Group and Clearwater Marine Aquarium. He is the co-founder and managing director of a marketing agency called Remedy 365 and a lecturer at Tulane University. An Ironman triathlete himself and a 5-time cancer survivor, Bill is a longtime volunteer at his local homeless shelter and an advisory board member of the Halo House Foundation. Welcome to Cancer is a Stupid Jerk, Bill.
Mike, thank you for having me on your show, and I can't agree with the title of your show more.
Well, tell me, why do you think cancer is a stupid jerk, Bill?
Well, cancer is like that, jerk boss you have, or maybe it's a neighbor that gets under your skin, that can bully you, that is unpredictable, that is completely aggravating. But at the end of the day, that jerk can make you stronger and can make you think about some things you may not have thought about before. And so ultimately, the way to handle the jerk is to not let it rock your boat too much, but look it in the eye and go toe to toe and do the best fight you can, and also focus on how it can change you and make your life better. And I mean, that is cancer in a nutshell.
Well, you mentioned a boss, like a stupid jerk boss. I just want to be clear. My boss is not a stupid jerk. Denise, if you're listening, you are the best boss I've ever had. But I love the analogy to a bully, and those of us who may have experienced a bully or two growing up. I certainly did. When you're going through being bullied, it is a horrible experience. But looking back, there are lessons that bullies teach you. They teach you how to stand up for yourself. Mm-hmm. If you successfully navigate the bully, right, you've the only way to do it is to turn around and stand up for yourself, mm-hmm. And sort of reclaim what they're trying to take away from you. Mm-hmm. And I want to dig into that part of your cancer story, but before I do, I want to just rewind all the way back to the beginning of just paint a picture for us about what your life was like before your first diagnosis with cancer.
Yeah, I was living in Houston, Texas, a little over 40 years old, 3 kids, 2 young ones, twins that were 3, a son who was 6. Go to the primary care physician. He looks at me and says, "Hey, Bill, you've got a nodule on your thyroid. Let's check it out. Let's biopsy it." Turned out to be thyroid cancer. As is typical, particularly with first-time cancer patients, everything is a rush, panic, get going, don't get a second opinion. And I wound up having my entire thyroid taken out in a 5.5-hour surgery, and went through radiation treatment. And then less than a year later, I went back to the same for-profit oncologist, and they did a scan. This was a Christmas Eve. And they called me in and like, "Look, your cancer's back, and we're going to do another round of radiation," which is the same radiation that came out of Chernobyl, which is iodine-131 that I received the first time. I mean, I literally was lit up by a Geiger. I was measured by a Geiger counter when I got it. So at that point, I'm like, something's not right here. because there's no way my thyroid cancer is back if I don't have a thyroid and I've been through that level of radiation. And so I reached out to my mom. I reached out to somebody at church, and pretty quickly, at the beginning of the year, I was in an MD Anderson in Houston, which is the number one cancer center in the world. Happened to be, I was living there at the time, so it was in my backyard. And they're like, Bill, your cancer is not only not back, you got some big giant dose of radiation, so let's just keep an eye on you. So in 2008, that came true. I was living now in St. Petersburg or in Tampa, Florida, and was diagnosed locally with stage 3 lymphoma. And so I went down to Houston to MD Anderson because I was already a patient there, and obviously I trusted them. And I went through treatment, was in remission from lymphoma in 2008, and then 2014 the lymphoma came back, so I went through treatment again, got it in remission. 2019 it came back again, so I went down to MD Anderson and was handled again. And then in 2020, during the midst of the pandemic with COVID, I was diagnosed in July of 2020 with prostate cancer and then lymphoma in September of 2020. And because I couldn't go back to Houston to MD Anderson because of the COVID restrictions at MD Anderson, I was lucky enough to get into Mayo in Jacksonville, which is a 4-hour drive from me. And so I went through treatment for the lymphoma. We put the prostate cancer on hold because it was low grade, and handle one thing at a time. And I just got the tar beat out of me with chemo, and so I got that in remission. But what that chemotherapy did is it wiped out my immune system, and so I spent 2.5 years pretty isolated. And I tell people truthfully that the bigger accomplishment wasn't beating lymphoma for the 4th time. It was not dying from COVID while going through treatment and the year or two post-treatment, because my chance of surviving COVID for probably the first year, starting treatment and 6 months after, was only 45% because I had no immune system. And so I let the medical advances catch up. And by the time I did get COVID, Paxlovid was out and the antiviral made for people like me, and it worked.
And also, I mean, by that point in time, COVID was a completely different strain.
It was.
It was, I remember, people who were getting sick in February of 2020, those are where the long haulers were coming in, right? I mean, they were getting super sick. And that was around the time my brother Greg was diagnosed with cancer. He was diagnosed in 2020. It was the summer of 2020 with lung cancer. So we were already in the lockdown, and he had to double down on his lockdown because he was battling lung cancer. So it was like, gosh, if he got COVID, he was scared to death. So not only was his life kind of put on hold, he had to isolate from friends and family, and which made it much more difficult for him and for all of us because we couldn't really be around him. It was
it was a lot of similarities between your brother's situation and mine relative to having to be careful around people. And luckily for us, we live in Florida, and we have a big outdoor porch with fans, so I could see people. But I found that very few people came over because nobody wanted to be the one that got me sick and wiped me out. So it was mostly phone calls.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, you're from the time of having your thyroid out, then having this sort of scare, and then going to a different hospital, and then sort of 3 rounds or 4 rounds with lymphoma and then prostate cancer. What did that do to your mindset? I mean, and how did you sort of cope mentally with all of that stress?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the thyroid cancer, I didn't have any mental issues or anything with that because I'm like, I got it, it's done, it's gone, it's cured, move on. That amount of radiation I got, I didn't really think about it till I got the stage 3 lymphoma in 2008, and I was talking to the doctors. I'm like, at MD Anderson, I'm like, what do you think? Where'd this come from? I'm like, Bill, you got lit up with radiation at levels that are unbelievable. So it's not for certain, but it's possible that this came from the treatment. and it's not uncommon. Second cancers are not an uncommon issue. But in 2008, I was pretty good with it until I went through my first treatment and I had a massive reaction, and it was truly a 911, and they saved my butt, and that's kind of the first time I thought about the dying part. And so the way I coped with it is I tried everything I could to just kind of do the best I could, living a normal life, and trying to shield my children from all of it. And to do that, I had to put on that strong front that everything was good with dad. I mean, there was one time I went to travel to Houston 23 times in 24 months, and that's on top of the travel for my work. So I wasn't home a lot. But when I was home, I just tried to live in the moment and tried to spend time with the kids and not stress them out. They were too young to really understand it anyway. And the way I was coping with it was by being busy. And I started really exercising like a wild man. So, wound up doing Ironman Texas, and I was swimming, biking, and riding all the time, up at 5 a.m, doing all that kind of stuff. So I was coping with that, and that truly was the best therapy I ever had. Was my time running in particular, or swimming, was great, because you could just focus on that. When you're cycling, you have to focus on the cycling, so you're really concentrating there, which is also helpful for stress. But it really wasn't. My kids didn't really understand it until they got a little bit older, and I would share a little bit more about what was going on. I mean, it's incurable, so they know is dad with cancer. But as I got into high school, I would lean a little bit more into sharing what was going on. And this last time, they're all in their 20s, but they're like, okay, we really get it, because I was full disclosure about what I was going through. So I always recommend professional help, groups, support groups, therapists, those types of things. Always help. It's something I still deal with, because I have prostate cancer now, and I got to deal with that. And I'm back in Mayo in October, and I got to go through scans for 3 different cancers. And the way I really deal with it, Mike, is I try to live in the moment, and I try not to think about it coming back, but I try to do everything I can to prevent it from coming back. So if you look at how I live my life, and it's been this way for a number of years, it's very disciplined. It's exercise, it's rest, it is diet to an nth degree. I hired a nutritionist, a dietitian to coach me through all that. It is social piece the best I can. Keeping my mind active, grounding, deep breathing, all those things that can hopefully stretch the amount of time before my lymphoma comes back and put me in a better position to be able to handle the beatdown that I'm going to take. And also, the more I stretch it, the longer I live, the longer I will live, because even in the last 5 years, there's been dramatic improvements and treatments for lymphoma. Not my particular version yet, but the more years I can get, the more years I've got a chance to either A, get cured, or B, in a longer remission. Long answer to your question, but it's a big answer.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a unique situation somewhat, because it's going to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, I get a lot of pushback on that from families. Like, how do you know it's going to come back, and why do you think that way? And I'm like, maybe it doesn't come back, but it probably will, because that's the type of cancer I have. But I'm doing everything I can to stretch that out, and that's all I can do. And I go to bed at night, and I'm like, did I do everything I could? Because obviously I think about it every single day. I take a pill every morning to replace my missing thyroid, but did I live today the best I could live it across the board, including all those things I mentioned to try to stretch out my remission?
Yeah. What, you mentioned sort of diet, exercise, sort of stuff you do to keep your mind busy. What role, if any, does faith and spirituality play?
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. I always had strong Christian faith, and having to think about dying and almost dying, for sure, tightens up that faith. It took me a while to get my hands around the whole dying part, but once I wasn't afraid of the dying piece, it really helped me relax and focus on other things. But while I've been alone from people, a lot of this journey, I've never been alone, because I always got him with me, and so prayer is a big part of what I do.
Yeah, and I
And
think
by the way, I've been a part of so many miracles. It's unbelievable. And so just being able to have this conversation with you today is, I mean, that strengthens my faith just like that, because I'm here.
yeah. When you say you've been part of so many miracles, tell me more about that.
Well, it start with getting into MD Anderson, right? Having had the mishit with the thyroid cancer and already being a patient, so that when I get diagnosed with cancer here, I'm already a patient at MD Anderson. And then not only do I get they're all really good doctors at MD Anderson, but I get assigned the doctor that sees more patients with my particular type of lymphoma than anybody in the world. I'm like, okay, all right, that's pretty good. So it sure increases the odds when you're with literally the best in the world. And so that was amazing. And then you can fast forward all the way to 2020, and I'm at Mayo, and I wake up from surgery September 17th, and I wake up having had a tumor removed, painful tumor removed from my right hip, which is my fourth time with lymphoma. And so I woke up in the recovery room, and I was having a total emotional breakdown. Not not like a few tears, we're talking full-fledged breakdown, which completely shocked me because my outward was always positive. And then I wake up off of morphine and fentanyl, and I'm having this enormous meltdown. And so here's another miracle. I have this nurse. It's only the two of us because this is lockdown time, so nobody else is with me. And she leans over and she goes, "What's wrong?" And I said, her name was Jen. I was like, "Jen, I think I'm done. I think I'm not up for the fight anymore." She's like, "Whoa." So she grabs my hand and she leans over and she goes, "I think God puts angels in your life when you most need them." She goes, "Maybe today that's my role." And I'm like, "Okay." And she goes, she goes and she calls the pastor, and Pastor Tanya comes in. And Pastor Tanya's like, "Hey, I saw you. I was in your room before the surgery," which I didn't remember. I had a whole room full of people, and I was having a rather serious discussion with the anesthesiologist about the anesthesia I was going to get because we weren't on the same page. So I didn't remember it. And so she goes, "What's up?" And so over the course of an hour, while my wife is like wondering, where is my husband and what is going on, we talk through all the reasons why I should fight. And she lays in her personal story into it, which I won't share, but she's been through it too. And so we concluded after this long conversation that I needed to fight for my family. I needed to fight for my friends. I needed to fight for my work, which was really meaningful. And then at the end, she says, "You also got to remember, you got to fight to make God proud." I'm like, okay. So my head was completely flipped. Here's another miracle. I gone from I'm giving up to, oh my gosh, I'm going to give it my best effort. That last piece, to make God proud, she came up with that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I need to do that. I got to always fight to make God proud because He created me, right? And then here's where things really got interesting. Last thing she says to me, she leans into me, literally nose to nose, says, "Okay, Bill, I got one more thing for you." Now, this is not her talking. This. She says, "Bill, I need you to turn your pain into purpose and write a book to help others." So I thought about it for a second. I'm like, okay, I'll do it. I didn't really want to write a book. I mean, I was getting ready to start treatment, and I was more worried about living than writing a book. But at my house, a deal is a deal. And look, I was coming off of fentanyl and morphine, and I had a lot of reasons why I could forget about that commitment or pretend I forgot about the commitment, but I didn't. And so I reached out to a publisher, Page Two. I sent them a note. the CEO calls me. The CEO. She goes, "Hey, Bill, this is Jesse." I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "Got your proposal." I'm like, "Okay." She goes, "We're going to do it." I'm like, "Okay." She goes, "I think there needs to be a book like What to Expect When You're Expecting." But in the cancer world, she'd had a close friend who had passed away. And she goes, "This book is needed. We'll help you do it." All right. So then I start writing the book. I'm going through it. They assign an editor who's very patient with me in different time zone because there's days I couldn't write. A lot of days I couldn't write. I couldn't do anything because I was taking a beating. And so we got the book outlined. Once the book was outlined, I started writing. They coached me on all of that. And then we kind of rushed it because I wasn't sure, if I was going to survive. So I wanted to make sure if I could make that commitment, at least it got out, whether I was around when it came out or not. And lo and behold, September of 2022, it was released. And I was shocked by the feedback I was getting from it. The first thing I didn't expect, I don't know why I didn't think about it, but it was giving people hope. If I can beat cancer 5 times, I'm going through it once, I can beat it 2. But then I started hearing from patients, and this is all ties into the whole miraculous piece of this direction to write this book, is people started to tell me like, this book is helping change my life. And then I started hearing from people like, "Bill, this book helped save my life because I got a second opinion, or I did this, or I did that." And I'm like, okay. And so all of a sudden, my life became helping other cancer patients because I'm accessible on purpose, Bill at billcpotts.com, so people can reach out to me if they're going through it. And I'm like, who could have made that up, that I would take this kind of pain and turn it into purpose? It wasn't my idea. And I'm like, wow, it's remarkable. And so as I get older and I pull back from full-time work, my consulting is now in the healthcare business, helping cancer patients on a paid side. On unpaid side, it's dealing with cancer patients and their families and their friends on a pretty frequent basis. And it's really given me so much purpose and makes me even more grateful that I fought. And so it also gives me confidence that when I wake up from my next surgery, for my next lymphoma, and I have my meltdown again, is that I'll realize that I have to fight so that I can fight, for these other people. So it's been the last, 22 years full of miracles.
The one miracle I'll just point out is, writing a book proposal and then sending it off. Number one, hearing a response that's positive. And then, but for someone to come and say, "Hey, look, just based on a proposal from some," and correct me if I'm wrong, but you had never written a book before.
I'd written a children's book that I'd self-published, but it had been years before. It wasn't anything serious. It's super cute and super fun, but no, I'm not. I never thought of myself as a writer.
Yeah.
So,
but just for that publisher to take you on and then coach you through the process, I mean, that's a big investment, and it's risky on their part. So that's another miracle that I would, from an author's perspective, I would certainly point out.
It was true, and Jesse and I are still, we're almost best friends now. It's amazing, and so that's turned into a beautiful friendship with she and her family, and there's another miracle in it. And agree.
And if that pastor hadn't given you that or laid down that challenge for you, really not more, it's more of a directive than a challenge, I guess, when she said, "You have to write this book."
I told my wife I'm going to write a book, and she's like, "What?" I mean, I owned a marketing agency at the time, and I was going through treatment at the time, and "You're going to write a book? When?" I'm like, "I got to write it now. I got to get going." And she's like, "Okay." And it turned out to be beautiful in many ways. We have a garage apartment, and we've got this cute Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, and my wife owned a business, and she was working a ton of hours, and I couldn't go anywhere except to our garage apartment where I could write. And so when I felt like it, I would write. When I didn't feel like it, I would nap. And it gave me a place to go that was safe and gave me a real purpose on how to spend my time and to take my mind off of the suffering I was going through. And that's another blessing of the book, is it got me through the hardest time of my life because I was so focused on trying to get this thing done.
Yeah. Now, you talk about the blessing of the book. I'm curious, what do you consider the blessings of your various bouts with cancer, if there are any?
No, there's a whole, I could write a whole book on that. But I think when you have to think about dying, it does teach you how to live better. And so if you put in the bucket of how I've lived better, of course, the diet, the exercise, the deep breathing, the grounding, the social piece, yeah, okay, that's all a part of it. But on the deeper side, obviously reconnecting and tightening my faith is important. That impacts all areas of my life. How I spend my time really has changed. And it's not so much what I do, which is important, but it's the things that I don't do and the people that I'm not around and the volunteer activities that I say no to that don't connect with me. And so I spend my time much more deliberately with friends, with family, and doing things that I think are going to make a difference versus some of the noise that I was doing before. And I even applied that to my career, trying to focus on the agency side on nonprofits, trying to focus my consulting on, which makes sense, for me in the cancer care area. And so it's helped spend my time. It's changed my relationship with money, which drives my wife crazy because I'm like, let's spend it on experiences, which she agrees with. I care less about the stuff, but I'm like, let's go. Let's spend it on experiences. And I don't have much of a throttle, but she does, thankfully. So she helps measure that. Like, what am I saving it for? And so the relationship with money is very different. And also the gratefulness on the money side, because like 25% of cancer patients have real financial issues. And it makes me really grateful that I've had good insurance. And even I had to use the Affordable Care Act over the last few years when I started my agency, and how grateful I am for that, because the Affordable Care Act is insurance for everybody. You just have to do your homework and find the right one that is right for you. And so I'm very grateful I don't have to sweat the financial stuff now. I mean, early on with 3 kids and cancer and, they're in the travel. I mean, it adds up. I think another way that it's changed me is that I take life less seriously. And I don't really sweat the small stuff as much. I was riding my bike. Somebody throws this Mountain Dew, hits me in the back out of a car. My wife's behind me and she's like, whoa. I'm like, yeah, I kind of feel bad for them that they're such horrible people that they're going to throw, a full Mountain Dew at somebody's back while they're riding a bike and they're driving 35 miles an hour in a car. And she's like, are you mad? And I'm like, no, I was playing tennis 3 weeks ago. And this guy nails me in the face with an overhead, which, by the way, it should never happen in 1,000 years of playing tennis. You shouldn't get hit in the face. And he unleashed one right at my face. And I had glasses on. And it hit straight on the lens of the glass. And I fall down and I'm down. And I think I'm bleeding, but it's just sweat. I get up. The other 2 people playing are like, we're done. We're not going to play anymore. I'm like, guys, if I'm not bleeding, I'm fine. It hit me exactly where it should. It hit me in the lens of my sunglasses. So I'm fine. And they're like, are you mad? I'm like, no, I'm not mad at all. I got home. I was like, why aren't you more mad? I'm like, why? What good is it going to do? So I just, yeah, it's all good. And that's all changed because of the whole having to look at dying part and going through what I've gone through. Is it really that important?
Right.
Yeah, no.
Right.
And I mean, it sounds kind of cliche, but it really is true. But, I've been knocking on the door of dying before. And It's like, is it really important that a lot across the street hasn't cut their grass? Is that something I should really worry about? No, who cares? Maybe there'll be more rabbits in there.
Right. You can kind of choose what you get upset about and
You
what
know,
not to get upset
I'm
about.
sure your brother was that way too, right?
Oh man, he I learned so much more about him, through his illness and from his wife, my sister-in-law Carolyn. She would just tell me, hey, look, your brother's favorite thing to do is sit in his yard and wait for hummingbirds to come.
Oh, hummingbirds are amazing.
And he had he had beautiful garden in the back, and he would just sit and he would get so excited, and he would tell my nieces, he would just run inside, hey, there's a hummingbird, and they'd all kind of come out, and
Cute.
and and I remember that, and I try and remember that, like when I'm having a bad day or like when I'm stressed out about something, I just try and think, hey, you know what, this stuff doesn't matter, right? It's you say don't sweat the small stuff, which I think is a great title for a book, which of course has already been written,
Yeah.
so we can't write that one, Bill. But uh, I think God, where was I going with that? Something about hummingbirds. I think about um, there are big things in life and there are small things in life, right? And I used to think the small things in life were, those times of, kind of getting through, like, I don't know, spending time with family, right? To me, it's something I always took for granted. And then what I realized coming out of my brother's experience was like, those really are the big things in life. Like those opportunities to just, have silliness at home with the kids. Are small moments, but they really are big moments. I don't know. I'm doing a terrible job describing it, but
No, it's so interesting because one way I think of it is like when you go out to eat with friends, and usually for me that's going to be an outside dining experience. But sometimes I go out with friends and they like spend 20 minutes like going through the menu, and I'm like, you literally are going to eat 350 dinners this year. So over your lifetime, you're eating like literally, thousands and tens of thousands of meals. You're never going to remember the meal. So it's spending time looking at the menu, but you are going to remember the people that you're with. So in that case, the food has nothing to do with the experience. It's all about the people, because in my whole life, I probably can't remember 20 meals that were so good that I actually remember them, right? But you can remember the times where you had a hilarious joke at a restaurant, or you remember the people, you remember the server, those types of things. So yeah, you're right. And I think that ties in with, I'm sure your brother was this way, but is a positive attitude. I really lean on that because look, I've seen patients, because I deal with so many all over the spectrum on attitude. Most people are kind of in the middle like me, which is a positive attitude, but also pragmatic. A positive attitude can't save the cancer patient. It can't. You can't positive, attitude your way into getting a cure. You have a lot of other things that have to go right, but it can help. And I don't know the science behind it, but I'm pretty positive that your body's going to heal better if you have positive energy running through your body. I'm sure that's true. But the piece that I've learned by watching others and going through this journey is it impacts the care team. So I can walk into Mayo or MD Anderson and walk in and like, how you doing? Oh my gosh, I'm alive today. I made it through another treatment. My stomach hurts. I've got chemo brain. My skin's a mess. I'm throwing up. I got neuropathy. All these things that are true, right? Or you could say, I'm getting through it. I'm one step closer to getting cured. I appreciate what you're doing. How are you doing? And it's human nature that people are going to want to spend more time with those that give them positive energy than those who are going to give them negative energy. So it makes an impact just on the healthcare team, though they probably deny it. It's true. And it's also the same way with family and friends. Hey, Bill, casual friend calls me when I'm going through chemo. Hey, Bill, how you doing? I'm like, yeah, I'm glad to be at Mayo. I'm getting through it. It's rough, right? So the really good friend calls and says, hey, Billy, how are you doing? I'm like, man, I am just getting the poop beat out of me, but I'm halfway through treatment. And are people going to want to call me versus the person that's like, oh, woe is me? Yeah, 100%. So there's a lot of benefits to having a positive attitude, a lot of which I didn't appreciate till I went through it. Now, I'm not talking about toxic positivity and lying about things, but I am saying put the positive spin on what you're going through.
Yeah. What's a number one piece of advice you would offer to somebody who just got the news that they didn't want to hear, which is, hey, so and so, you've got cancer. Um,
Yeah,
what's the first thing you would tell somebody?
I there's I'll weave this into a few things, but number one is it's your journey, nobody else's. You own it. It's not your oncologist, not your cancer centers. It's your life. You need to own it. It's life or death in many cases. So you need to own the journey, which means it's a little counterintuitive thinking to the way a lot of people think, particularly if they're in their 50s or 60s or 70s when they're diagnosed with cancer. Average age is 61, going down, sadly, of cancer diagnosis in the US. But so you own your journey, which means you pick your care team, you pick your attitude, you get second opinions, you find where you're going to go, you do your homework, you get your financial pieces in order, you make your insurance, make sure your insurance is right, you communicate it to your friends and family the right way. Owning your journey is really a mindset. And so the first piece, to answer your question even more directly, once you get the mindset right, is get a second opinion 100% of the time. Get a second opinion. And B, if you're at a local cancer center and you want to get a second opinion, go to a National Cancer Institute designated cancer center, which of their 61 in the US, these are the high volume cancer centers like an MD Anderson, a Dana-Farber, a Mayo. I could go on UC Davis in Sacramento. I could go on and on and on. The Hutch in the Pacific Northwest. So they're there. Get your second opinion there, because no matter what your type of cancer, they see more types of cancer than the local can possibly see. I live here in Tampa that has sun shines roughly off and on 360 days a year. We have Moffitt here, top cancer center in the country. If I had skin cancer, no matter where I lived, I go to Moffitt. Why? They probably see more melanoma patients than anybody in the country, right? Why? They're in the Sunshine State. So you've got to get that a second opinion. You got to go to the high volume cancer center. That advice alone can be life-saving and life-changing for sure.
Yeah. Well, where can people buy your book, Bill? Up for the Fight.
Anywhere books are sold, but I try to send people to Amazon because you can't beat Amazon Prime. So buy it on Amazon, and if you buy it and you like it, a good review would always help. I get a tiny percentage of reviews to per book sales, which I guess is the nature of the beast. People are going through cancer while they're reading it, and it's in the size that you can carry it with you into your treatments. It's got checklists of what to do before and after. It'll guide you through what types of treatments to expect, what type of tests to expect. It has a chapter in there written by my family, guidance for the family and friends of cancer patients. And it truly is the guidebook to walk you through the journey.
Very good. Well, Bill, thank you so much for stopping by. Cancer is a stupid jerk, and sharing all the reasons why cancer is a jerk, but also, I think it is important to hear about those blessings that that it has provided, because I think those are real. And we could focus on the negatives, but it's also important to hear about the positives as well.
Well, I mean, there are 18 million cancer survivors in the U.S. So there's currently, so there's a lot of happy stories out there. And no matter what type of cancer you're diagnosed with, there's always hope, and treatments are getting better. And the math doesn't count. Whatever your cancer is, don't look up. Don't look up the odds, because the odds don't count. Because if the odds are 1 in a million and you're the one, then you 100% survived. So you don't need to worry about that. You just need to focus on your own journey. Don't listen to other people's stories. Just, don't let people tell you what to do. You own it, you do it, and you give it your best shot.
Yeah. As my old running coach would say, run your race. Don't run somebody else's race. You got to run your race.
It's a great line.
Yeah. I'm gonna use that again, I think.
Yeah, you should. It's perfect for the cancer battle, and where people get off the rails. And look, I've had this happen to me so many times, is they don't do their own homework, and they listen to the person that says, drink this juice, which I've had, it can cure your cancer. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. Go to this country to get this unique treatment. Quit eating sugar because sugar causes cancer. Some of these myths that are out there, look, too much sugar is bad because it increases your risk of diabetes, and it increases your risk of being overweight, which increases your risk of cancer significantly. So yes, but you have to go to this doctor because, oh, my friend used him, he's really nice. Oh my gosh, he's only 3 miles away, so you should use this doctor. As you said, run your own race. It's your life. It's your race. You run it.
Very good. A good point to end on. Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you, Mike, for having me.
Thank you for joining us today on Cancer is a Stupid Jerk. We hope you found inspiration in today's episode and felt the strength of a community that refuses to let cancer have the last word. Remember, you're not alone in this fight, and every step forward is a victory. Join us every Sunday for more stories of resilience and recovery, and make sure to subscribe to our podcast on YouTube or your preferred podcasting platform. If you want to follow us on social media, you can find us at Stupid Jerk Cancer. If today's story moved you, consider sharing it with a friend or somebody who might need a dose of inspiration and encouragement. For all you bibliophiles out there, please check out our sister podcast, Uncorking a Story, which features interviews with best-selling authors. Until next time, keep laughing, keep loving, and keep fighting. This is Mike Carlin reminding you that together, we're unstoppable.